Hi, my name is Paul Arnold and I'm a qualified psychotherapist and trained coach. And today I want to talk about dealing with someone close to you who has, and let's call it at this point, issues, whatever that happens to be. And the reality is that, you in many ways suffer as much as they do. You're caught in their sort of wake of all what's going on for them. And the trouble is, it has profound impact upon you, particularly your emotion, and everything is unstable. There's no certainty in that relationship with them. And you're constantly worrying, you don't know when the phone's gonna ring, you don't know when the next event is gonna happen. And at the same time, you're living in a place of hope, like they seem to be better today or whatever's going on. But then there's those broken promises, there's the deception, there's the letdown, and that leaves you feeling a place of sort of hopeless and helpless because you can't seem to create a change, and you feel trapped in the situation, and there's frustration, and there's anger, and there's exhaustion, and there's humiliation, the way you've been treated, the way you feel you've had to deal with this, and obviously a degree of shame and a degree of hiding this away from other people. So let's talk a little bit about the sort of theories that we as psychotherapists may be looking into. And this is going to sound a little bit cruel, and I don't want to really add further pain to it, but I think we've got to look at what has been our role in that space. And there is a lot of work done on codependency, and some people seem to seek out relationships where they are needed and they are wanted, and where in some very extreme cases they push the person into a place where they have that role of becoming what I will call the rescuer. Very often down to actually a place of internal low self-esteem. I don't feel good about who I am, but however, if someone needs me, it makes me feel more wanted and a better person. And there's also a power and a control that can come from that space of, I am now going to control this person. I have power over this person who is in a vulnerable state. And can often be because there's been years of sort of inferiority where you've been controlled yourself. So, sometimes in the therapy room, we need to explore that as well, as painful as it may be, because it's very often we'll jump from one codependent relationship into another and into another. And we often talk about the drama triangle, and that can be, we can be victim, we can be rescuer, we can be persecutor. And very interestingly, here you are, you've got someone who is the victim. Something's going on, they're addicted to something, right? They're in a big sort of massive space of overwhelm, they just can't struggle, they're in a massive space of depression or whatever is going on for them. And therefore you become that fantastically loyal, loving person, and you rescue them. And that's fantastic. But then what you then find is after a period of time, you get a little bit hacked off with the amount of rescuing you need to go and do. And you therefore almost go into places where with your friends, you're the victim. Oh my God, I have to deal with this all the time. And you can actually become a persecutor as well. Because you think for goodness sake, and you become slightly crueler in that space. So we've got to be aware about what role we're playing and why we're playing in that particular role. Now, within this field, the big thing we say is that you cannot change another person. You can only change yourself and change your reaction, how you deal with that person. And I think there's something about the fundamental thing you've got to do is realize they need to be in control of their own change. All you can do is be there to support them, maybe help pick them up, to help sort of empathize with them. But you can't make them do something they have not themselves decided to do. So you've got to let go of that. Because once you let go of that, you're then free of all that pressure upon my fault, I couldn't make the person change. You can't do that. You know, they must realize they're responsible for their own action. And maybe your role is to make them become aware of what's going on. Because very often people are, you know, I don't have a drink problem, I can control it. So, well, you do have a drink problem. And very often, you know, what we need to do is share that with them and share our pain. And we often use the phrase like, you talk about I, not you. You don't say you've got a problem. You say like, you know, when you drink and when I can't get you off the sofa, you know, and when, you know, you're sick on the floor, I have to clear it up. And it makes me feel so useless and so pathetic, and I feel very sad about what's going on for you. So in that sense, you share where you are about it, rather than saying to them, you got to go sort this out. Now, hopefully, in doing that, you're going to help encourage them that they need to seek professional advice. Because again, that's not what you signed up for. That's not your role, you know? So I think at this point, let other people deal with that. They will actually have a better chance of getting change because they can have the conversations you can't have, because your conversation with the other person has a certain relational form to it, which stops you saying certain things. More of that another time. So how does change happen? There's a fantastic book there, you know, the Heart and Soul of Change, which looked at all the empirical, what makes change happen in the therapy room. You know, the empirical evidence actually says, like, you know what? It's fundamentally down to a couple of things. It's down to the relationship you have with the therapist. And the best way the therapist can be is to be unconditional positive regard, as we say, with the person. We're not judging them. We're not criticizing them. We are just accepting for where they are and accepting the pain of where they currently are. And we are then empathizing with where they are. And what we're not trying to do, we are not trying to drive the change. It's up to the individual in the therapy room. And I think actually at the end of the day, you know, the thing the book says is that the client themselves is the primary focus and agent of change. It's when they feel they're in a supported place and they come to their own recognition of what's going on, and they know that we're there to help support them, that's when the change happens. So in that sense, your role is to just offer unconditional positive regard, offer empathy, and just be there for them. That's about all you can really do in that space. And what I often say is, you know, through understanding comes acceptance. So if you understand that what had happened to that person, we often say not what's wrong with them, but what's happened to you, allows you to therefore make sense of the pain and the torment that poor person who's close to you is going through. And then you can then somehow be less frustrated and more in a place of empathy. So some sort of tips really building off that. You know, I think you've got to be supportive, but be very clear. You got to avoid being manipulated and being triggered by this. And it's a fine line. And you know what? You won't get it right all the time. You know, and you know, you got to almost like not encourage, not do things to support them. So in other words, if you've got someone who is drinking a lot, taking lots of drugs, doing a lot of gambling, don't give them access to finance, because that's just going to make it worse. Even if they say, oh, could you lend me 20 quid? I just need to go and get some milk. No, buy the milk. You know, don't give them 20 quid, because the 20 quid is not going to go on the milk. So we've got to be doing that. You know, and actually, you know, we've also got to not protect them, not make excuses for them. They've got to be able to become aware of the consequence of their own actions. And I know that sounds cruel, but in many ways, the longer that you rescue them and you protect them, the longer it's going to be before they can actually realize they need to do something about it. So actually, being cruel is the kindest thing you can be. I know that sounds horrible, and I appreciate with someone you love is so difficult, but you've got to hold your nerve in that stuff. And there's something about having very clear boundaries. If you have someone who is, shall we say, a drinker, we'll stay with that for now, who is also aggressive, you must not be prepared to put up with that person's aggression. You know, you must make very clear boundaries about what's allowable and what's not allowable, and you must stick to them, and you must tell them what it is, you know? And very often you need boundaries yourself to be very clear, what are your needs in this space? Because very often with someone who's very needy, you give up all your own needs, and you must have your own needs for your own sanity and your own mental health. You know, and likewise, therefore, you do need to have time away. If this is a very highly emotionally charged, you do need to get time away yourself. And in terms of, how can psychotherapy? So psychotherapy is going to be a really powerful space that can help with the person with the issues, but also it's a very important place for you yourself. And I've done lots of work with family members who have been affected by someone who has got, some of the family with some form of addiction, and I'm very privileged to have worked in that field, and it's great to see, the role that psychotherapy can do to at least help them to come to terms with another person and to realize it's not their fault and it's not their responsibility. Anyway, I hope that helps. Keep well.